Hello everybody and welcome back to ChäoS. It has been, by the time this video goes up, probably about a month, maybe a little bit over, I'm not 100% certain. But, around about a month. The reason for that is quite simply, as I've mentioned in previous parts, I was going to be going through a move in the relatively near future. I didn't have exact details as to when it would take place or how long it would take, but ended up taking longer than I had initially anticipated. Hence why there hasn't been any videos for the past couple weeks. Um, and I'm still sort of dealing with the fallout of it, of trying to find shit. I'm not using my normal monitor that I normally use. I need to use a spare monitor that I had lying around. Um, that's not going to impact recordings, at least, because AMD has feature that allows me to run the monitor at a higher resolution than its native resolution. So that way I don't have any issues on my end when it comes to being able to give you guys the content, and I don't think it's going to look all that different. I do want to go ahead and note that this video is going to be a bit of a shorter one because OBS was giving me a bit of trouble before recording this, and I need I'd rather do a short part. That way, on the off chance that it's screwed up and I have to re-record it, it's not a particularly long video that I have to re-record. So let's go ahead and let me get my timer started. So when I logged in to ESO as Lieselot, like I always did, 3 hours passed by in the blink of an eye. It had been 2 weeks since I'd used Lieselot, but I was pretty satisfied by how well she cheered up everyone around her. I left that cafe in a good mood and headed home. The shopping district was as boisterous and full of people as ever. I'd always found it annoying, and the illumination of the various stores lined up along the street made it so bright that I had a hard time believing it was night. At the end of that bright road, I jerked to a stop when I saw it, for it stood out still more in the middle of the night, or in the middle of the crowd, rather. That girl was. In the midst of such a large number of people, she glared at me unwaveringly. In the shopping district, where people came and went without ceasing, where it was difficult to so much as walk in a straight line, she stood still, smack in the middle of the road, resting the colossal sword she held in her hand on her shoulder. It was a blatantly bizarre spectacle, but no one paid any attention to her sword. They floated around her, passing her on either side without any change in demeanor. She was the girl I had seen at 107. She'd been there when Nanami and I went to get a cell phone. The shape of the sword, her sume uniform, her long dark hair, each characteristic matched perfectly. Back then, she'd been standing atop the stairs to 107, watching the people below go to and fro. In addition, I recalled the sharpness of her glare. I had met her once before at school. Almond-shaped eyes, a face attractive enough to make her a model, although it conversely made her seem unapproachable, sleek, dark, waist-length hair. She was a girl B, and roughly a week ago, she'd rudely asked me, "Who are you?" in the corridor between buildings. But why was she staring at me? Thinking I was being overly self-conscious, I turned around. At times like this, it might turn out that she was actually looking at an acquaintance of hers over my shoulder or something. But that didn't seem to be the case. The one she was glaring at, with a look of hostility, was, as I thought, me. I shrank. I understood what it felt like to be the proverbial frog getting glared at by a snake. Staring back was out of the question. Locking eyes with people was my biggest weakness, so I had no choice but to look down. Time to run. Normally, I'd go home by turning left at the scramble crossing where she was standing, coming out next to Bookist. But today Book First, however it's supposed to be pronounced. But today I decided to go around by the station plaza. There were a lot of people there, but I'd take a pass on letting some scary 3D girl pick a quarrel with me. She might try to shake me down for money. Girl B looked like she was alone. In truth, maybe her juvie friends were lying in wait nearby, plotting to beat me senseless once she lured me in. I wasn't about to take the bait. I swung around to the right and was dumbfounded.
Oh, eh?
Also, quick note that my audio might sound a little bit different. I do not have my microphone on its boom arm like I normally had it on. Um, Also, more fans in the room that I'm currently in because it gets quite a bit hotter, and of course the acoustics in this room are different than the room I used to be in, so I might need to fine-tune my audio settings a little bit, so please feel free to leave a comment if you notice any particularly glaring issues with the audio quality, so I can try to figure out where I need to make adjustments to. For some reason, girl B was in front of me. Flustered, I looked over my shoulder at the pedestrian scramble. She wasn't there. I looked to the front again. As before, the sword-bearing girl B went on glaring at me. When? How the hell she circled around me? There were limits to being fast. This was practically teleportation. How had she known I was going to turn around anyway?
Oi.
Her voice reached my ears with an awful clarity. I frantically surveyed my surroundings. I wanted to think she had been calling to someone else. Though suspicious, I searched for someone who seemed like a suitable target for her hey. But of course, they weren't there. Also, and I know I'm again interrupting the flow of this, I also don't have the pop filter on my microphone, so that's also going to potentially affect the audio quality somewhat. The pop filter I use is intended for being attached to a microphone arm, but like I said, don't have mine on there right now, because I still need to find what box it's in, unpack it out of there, and put it back together. So yeah. A couple of salarymen passing nearby gave Girl B dubious looks, but they soon realized she wasn't referring to them and walked away. Girl B, who had until then been standing dauntingly in place, took a sudden step in my direction. That was sufficient to make me certain of it. Girl B was targeting me, after all.
お前、見えるのか?
As disconcerting as ever, in my 17-year life, I could probably count the number of times a girl had spoken to me this curtly. There were times when Kirimiya Tsubaki, nicknamed Sunko, had talked to me like that in a tsundere sort of way. Then again, Sunko was a 2D girl from an eroge called Tell Me Doll. Girl B kept approaching me even while these idiotic thoughts ran through my head. She had this overwhelming feeling to her. Though she was only a girl, I wondered at it a little, but the reasons were simple. With a sharp look in her eyes and her oversized sword, for a sword, it had a fairly singular design. If you regarded at it as something anime-esque, it was fabulously formed, but if you tried to use it in real life, it wouldn't do you a bit of good. It was definitely a weapon from a mecha anime or something. Had any mecha anime started airing recently? Except, even though I knew it had to be an anime cosplay prop, it looked incredibly hard and sharp. It had an air about it that suggested your fingers could get sliced right off if you touched it. It was a mysterious sword.
見えるのかと聞いている.
Girlby had already cut the distance between us down to 2 meters. Close enough so that if she swung her sword, it would reach me. I hastily took a step back, but it was too late. Girl B shortened the distance further. She swung her sword for real. I don't have my coin or dice that I normally would sometimes roll for these choices, and it's been so long now that I do not recall what the last thing we did was. I think it might have been a green. You know what? Oh, and I'm pretty sure I probably played this last time in my initial run through of this series, or at least attempted run through. But for the life of me, I can't recall if we ended up with a green or a red choice, or a good or bad delusion rather. I'm wanting to say I think we might have had a good delusion when we did this, way back when, all those years ago. But for the life of me, I cannot recall. So we're just going to go into a bad delusion. Crouching down on the spot, I covered my head. If I didn't dodge it, it would hit me right in the head. It wouldn't cut me or anything, but with her swinging that hard, I'd get a cerebral concussion and a dented skull for sure. I hate pain. I was so shaken my Japanese got all strange.
やはり間違いない。お前、私が見えているんだろ。
はい。
Had she just asked if you can see me? Me, in short, was Girl B herself, standing directly before my eyes? Girl B's face suddenly crumpled with sadness, and she crouched down in front of me. With her eyes on the same level as mine, she looked at me as though they were clinging to me.
私、誰にも見つけてもらえなくて、どれだけ声を出しても、誰にも届かなくて、体はすり抜けちゃうし、寒いし、ほら、見て、私、足も透けちゃって、自分に何が起きたのか、さっぱり、わからなくて。
Yeah, this seems new to me, so yeah, I think we might have done a good delusion last time.
もう、何年も、何十年も、この場所、さまよっていたような気がする。
Could she be a ghost? No way. How dumb. I don't have a trace, I don't have a trace of ESP.
ずっと、探してた。私を見つけてくれる人。ありがとう。ありがとう。お礼に。お前に取り付いてやる。
Well, that sounds fun.
答えろ。見えるんだな。理想度が。
I couldn't immediately grasp my situation after I came back to myself, and I made the mistake of staring up at Girl B's face. She wasn't crying, and her legs weren't see-through, and her hands were regular hands. Oh, it'd been a delusion, huh? Well, that aside, D-sword? What'd she mean? It was the first time I'd heard that word. Well, she said sword, and the blade-shaped object she carried was certainly a sword. But why ask if I could see her sword? For the time being, I nodded. Geez, of course I could see it. It'd be weirder not to see it. Because she was carrying around a sword that big and conspicuous in the shopping district of all places. I'd be able to accept it if this were Akiba, but in Shibuya? No way.
そうか。お前も集められたんだな。
Gathered? Who? Gathered who? I was here of my own accord, at least, but...
エラーを見たことがあるか。
You speak in Japanese? I wanted to say, but typically enough, I lacked the courage. After all, if I said something klutzy, she'd stab me. Really, though, she hadn't been making any sense whatsoever for a while now.
見たら教えろ。
After saying this to me, Girl B turned on her heel. Her skirt wavered in the breeze, making it seem like I might glimpse her panties. I hurriedly closed my eyes.
私は3年の青い瀬名、駅前の電車にいる。
My eyes went wide. Soon afterward, the girl who called herself Senna had vanished. I was so dazed, it prevented me from realizing not a single thing she'd said was comprehensible until after I returned to my base. On the top of everything, I'd have to go to school 3 times this week. What a bother. A mysterious screech sounded from a little ways away. It caught me by surprise, and my shoulders jumped when I looked in the direction the voice had come from.
鬼!
Nanami came galloping toward me with astounding momentum. I thought I'd run away, but it was too late. She circled around me and blocked the way. She'd always been good at sports.
ちょっとなんで妹見て逃げるの
Because you're annoying? Because you made me depressed, obviously.
あ、そうやってすぐ黙るし。
Really? But why had she decided to come to Suime Academy, the same school I attended? It caused me boundless trouble when we bumped heads at school like this, or when she put her foot down and started meddling with this and that.
ねえねえ、携帯どう？使ってる？使ってないでしょ。買ってからもう何日か経ってるけど、一度も家にかけてこないもんね。
I started walking faster in hopes of shaking Nanami off, but she stubbornly stuck with me.
家に生存報告の電話ぐらいしなよ。そのために買ったんだから。
Well, it's more of a that's why you forced it on us in the first place.
どうしても嫌なら、ナナの携帯にかけるだけでもいいからさ。
I think we're less likely to call you than we are to call home in general.
お母さん、心配してるんだからね。そもそも、ちゃんとご飯食べてんの？どうせコンビニ弁当ばっかなんでしょ？やっぱお兄に一人暮らしは無理なんだよ。家に帰ってきなよ。ナナがどんな気持ちでお兄の様子見に行ってるか分かってる？いつも心配でしょうがないんだからね。
So obnoxious. What the hell was her problem? Are you my mom or something? I don't talk about that kind of thing on the wayside, it's humiliating. She made me gloomy even at the best of times, and now my mood was steadily plummeting in the worst possible direction. For starters, there was nothing more embarrassing than going to school together with your little sister. It happened a lot in Narrowgay, and there had been times I'd longed to be in such a situation, but Nanami couldn't hold a candle to 2D little sisters. Give me a cute sister. Nanami and I, both somewhat crossed, walked up to school side by side. I studied her to see if I had a chance of escaping before we reached the school gates. Though she'd been talking fast and furious when she came up to me, Nanami had fallen silent and was walking along with an absent-minded look on her face. Her eyes seemed to be drifting around, but maybe it was only my imagination. Her feet were unsteady. She seemed strange, I thought suspiciously. She went on swaying toward the road, right as a car came speeding along. Frantic, I grabbed Nanami's arm and pulled her back. The car zoomed by, honking its horn. She narrowly missed being hit.
何やってんだ。
あれ？
Blinking, Nanami cocked her head to one side.
ナナ、今なんであんなこと？あれ？
This girl. She was an honest-to-God idiot. Not understanding something she herself had done. For the record, let me say that I didn't find it moe. It wasn't moe in the slightest. Seriously, fed up, I left behind the still stupefied Nanami and hurried on ahead.
あ、お兄、ちょっと待ってよ。
I ignored Nanami until we got to school, then went down the still boisterous hallway to my classroom. When walking down a hall, stick to one side or the other, go neither too quickly nor too slowly. Lower your eyes and walk without meeting anyone's gaze. Those were the 3 items I paid careful attention to. Don't stand out at school. Be the same as air. That was how I got around safely.
Yo, Taku.
Yet today, the same person appeared again and interfered with my attempts to blend in. Catching up with me from behind, Misumi gave me his usual friendly pat on the shoulder.
おいっす。挨拶ぐらいしろって。ま、お前がそういうやつだってのは分かってるけどよ。なあ、この前 D 組の女子の話したよな。めったに学校来ねえけど、すげえ可愛い女子がいるって。その子、岸本綾瀬って名前なんだけどよ。実はその岸本に関して すげえ発見したんだ。
And Misumi suddenly lowered his voice and checked out our surroundings. It was probably something vulgar again. Wearying of him, I almost let out a sigh.
フェスいるだろ？フェス。
Yeah. But his words made me catch my breath.
その岸本ってのがフェスなんだよ。俺マジビビったぜ。まさかフェスがうちの学校の生徒だなんてよ。しかも俺らとタメだってことだぜ。
For some reason, Misumi stuck the upper half of his body out a nearby window and gazed rapturously up at the sky.
運命ってきっとこういうことを言うんだな。
Oh god. We were on the 4th floor. If he slipped even a tiny bit, he'd fall down, break his neck, and lose his life. I was on pins and needles as I watched him. Misumi gradually leaned out further, looking down at the entranceway below the window.
噂をすればなんとやらだタク。岸本を発見した。もうすぐここに来るぜ。え？
With so many coincidences piling up, maybe he had been correct in saying it was fated. Not that I had any interest.
よし、待ち構えてやる。見てろタク。俺のナンパ術ってのを見せてやるよ。
He was overflowing with self-confidence as he spoke. Oh boy, it must be nice having a face like his. Pickup lines and the like existed in a completely different world for me. I didn't want to try using them either. After some time, Fess, no, her real name was Kishimoto ISA, came into view. Just as Misumi had said, it was the real FES. I made certain of it myself, the real Fess. I made certain of it myself, watching secretly from a slight distance. Even now, I was surprised she had turned out to be the same age as us. Fess walked along slowly, wearing her Suime uniform and giving off an air of ennui, or however that's pronounced. It created a remarkably different impression from how she had looked while singing on stage. At the time, though she spoke apathetically, she had given off something along the lines of a powerful sense of energy and activity. But right now, the atmosphere around her merely made her seem melancholy and difficult to approach. Pretending not to notice it, Misumi walked casually up to Fess with the same friendly intimacy he always showed me.
Yo, Kishimoto-san. Oh, hayo.
What a refreshing yet false-seeming smile. To think he could take that attitude with someone he'd practically never met before. It made me shiver with awe. I idolized him, but I didn't want to imitate him.
あ、俺三角大輔。よろしく。おっと、初対面とか思ってるだろう。でも違うんだな、これが。俺さ、こないだファンタズムのライブ行ったんだよね。だから君に会うのは2度目。で、その時君の歌声にこう、なんつうの？別に俺ミーハーとかじゃねえよ。惹かれたのはさ、詩とか君の可愛さとかそういうところもあるけど、でも何より一番すげえって思ったのはやっぱバンドとしての完成度っつうか、あの音あっての君の歌声っつうの。ちなみに俺も実はバンドやりたいなって思っててさ、よかったらああいういいバンドメンバーを見つけるコツとか、バンドの先輩としての心得みたいなもの教えてくんねえかな。あ、今すぐじゃ迷惑だろうから、そうだな、放課後とか暇？どっかで二人きりでじっくり話さない？
Misumi chattered on without resting. He used a different tone than normal, and he was obviously putting on another voice. Plus, instead of directly hitting on her, he brought up the topic of bands and such so as to casually invite her. By the way, this is the first time I'd heard about him wanting to form a band. No matter how I thought about it, it had to be a lie. He'd go that far to score some points, to make an event flag stand up with her. But Press didn't give Misumi a second glance. We just did a red delusion, or bad, well, yeah, generally speaking, red or bad, in this case. Depends a little bit on the exact perspective, but as a general rule of thumb, they're bad delusions. Something bad happens in them. Which I am slightly curious, because I imagine there's something bad that happens will be something that happens to him. But you know what? We'll go with a green again. Or not again, but we'll go with a green this time. As though she hadn't heard a single thing, she went on plodding down the hallway, and I clicked just a little bit shy of the actual delusion thing, so it didn't register.
なあ、聞いてる？
Bess came to a halt. Her faintly lowered gaze slowly rose. She looked at me. Eh? Me? Come to think of it, I thought she was staring at me during the concert, too. To begin with, 3D girls have been staring at me pretty damn often over these past 2 weeks. What was going on? Had I blossomed into popularity?
私、好きな人がいるのよ。
え？マジ？何何？それって俺のこと？
Dude, she said there's somebody else. Or, well, there's already somebody I like, rather. It's pretty obvious if you're the one hitting on her and she says there's already somebody I like, it's not referring to you.
そこの人。
そこ？
Over there? Over where? Bess wasn't pointing anywhere. She simply looked at me. She was looking only at me. Maybe I was the guy she liked?
この前、ライブに来てたわね。
So did he. Bess began walking toward me, still not averting her gaze. The people around us started making a stir. Apparently everyone had their ears pricked to hear this utterly unthinkable confession from Shibuya's charismatic diva, Fess.
いや、俺もライブに行って。
Yeah, what he said.
一目で悟ったわ。
Fess wasn't listening to Misumi. She seized my tie in one hand and pulled me toward her, close enough for me to have an acute sense of how she was breathing. This wasn't the kind of distance you'd find between new friends, nor would it work too well for family. Yes, this was the kind of distance that belongs between lovers.
君が私の運命の人だって。
Bess stroked my cheek with the tips of her fingers. She didn't show a hint of a smile. The seductiveness of that gesture made me shudder. I was becoming enchanted by her. I couldn't look away.
決めたわ。私、お嫁さんになる。
Although her declaration was something quite remote from the air of Inoue that Fess bore about her, the gap between the two was, to the contrary, unbearably cute. As our surroundings burst with excitement over how Fess had literally just proposed to me, Misumi was so crestfallen at having lost to me that he fell to his knees on the spot.
僕の意見は無視ですか？
Yeah. What if we don't want you to be our bride? What if we're interested in somebody else?
嫌なの。
嫌じゃないです。
I was getting swept along by the flow of things. I'd end up as one of life's winners simply by becoming engaged to such a lovely girl. And thus began our heart-pounding love story. Or not. Yeah, as if. While I was having my stupid daydream, Fess murmured something in a tiny voice and swiftly went away.
自信なくすぜ。くそー。
Having been completely ignored by her, Misumi was sulky. Given that she could so cleanly turn down an invitation from a stud like him, perhaps Fess was actually the Yuri type.
それはすごくいいスールです。
Especially for a petite. I have no idea how to pronounce that. Was a lolly type character like Nanami. Yeah.
あんな不愛想な女、もう二度と相手にしてやるもんかよ。うぜえ。だいたい何が剣を見つけろだ。わけわかんねえ。
Yeah, but the antisocial types can sometimes be fun.
剣。
Sword?
ああ、岸本がそう言ってただろ。
Literally heard nothing about a sword.
剣を見つけろ。そうすれば救われるって。
Well, that sounds nice, doesn't it? Being saved.
なあ、タク。ファンタズムの歌にそんな歌詞でもあるのか？
A sword. Had she been referring to something like the mic stand-esque thing she'd been using during her show? Now that she mentioned it, 2 days ago a completely different person had interrogated me about a sword. That girl called Senna had been amazingly scary. I'm gonna go ahead and stop my timer here. We'll read through this little bit of dialogue and then we'll end this part. I thought she cut me down for real. The sword she held had differed in shape from the one Fess brought to her show, but they possessed similar atmospheres. I wonder if they were connected in some way. I don't know. I don't know a thing. Shogun, the demon girl, Yua, Fess, Senna, a sword. Okay, we're going to go and end this part here. I am going to point out something about those bullet points. They are not properly centered. Fess seems to have been indented slightly more than any of the other ones, and the indentation on them just was not correct. Like I said, they were not properly centered. That's going to be it for this part. I will see you all next time. Quick reminder, I do have a Patreon and a Discord. You can find links to those down below in the description. I do highly recommend that you join the Discord because that is my go-to place for posting about channel happenings. You would have known about the move. Well, you would have had more details, rather, regarding the move much sooner if you had been a part of my Discord prior to the move occurring. So, like I said, I do highly recommend that you join that. If you find yourself enjoying the content on the channel, the best place to help support it, or rather the best way to help support the channel, is to go and become a patron. For as little as $1 a month, you get early access to all my videos and helps the channel out immensely, especially if more and more people go and become patrons. I will see you all next time, but until then, a goodbye and farewell.